You know, in this classic video, I'm going to deconstruct the prevailing mainstream argument that the United States government is actively fighting against radical Islamic groups like the Islamic State, and argue instead that they are actually covertly supporting these groups. And why I take this position: in order to understand this, you have to understand history. And most people, most Americans don't understand history. Most Americans are ignorant of their own history, to say nothing of anybody else's history. So you first have to understand the historical context of this argument, because it has happened in the past. We are repeating the same policy of supporting, either by financial means, by logistical means, by arming with weapons, these types of radical jihad groups like the Islamic State. So first you have to go back to December of 1979, and you can look this up. This is true. When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, the United States armed, funded, and provided logistical support for the Mujahideen, the modern-day Taliban, in that so-called tribal regions of Afghanistan and Pakistan. They armed those groups to fight against the Soviet Red Army in Afghanistan. You fast forward that a decade, even more, you have an increase of radical Islamic terrorist attacks on United States sovereignty, whether it was the USS Cole bombing off the coast of Yemen, the 2 US embassy bombings in Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania, culminating in the big attack on September the 11th. And so you move on today and you see this same phenomenon repeating itself with US government covert support of the Islamic State. And this has been going on for a few years, going back to the Arab Spring, the origins of the Arab Spring, in Libya, overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi. What took his place was what at best could be described as a Hobbesian nightmare. To this day, funneling weapons through the US embassy or the US consulate in Benghazi to radical Islamists in Syria and Iraq. That was the scandal of Benghazi. It wasn't the cartoon, the Hillary Clinton, Susan Rice on the Sunday talk shows. Oh, it was a cartoon. That wasn't the scandal. The scandal was shipping weapons through that consulate to Islamic extremists in Syria. That's what they won't tell you. But this is true. You can look this up. And now people say, well, ISIS, they're barbarians, and Obama has to ask for a war authorization from Congress, even though he's been bombing them with airstrikes for the last 6 months. Now President Barack Hussein Obama is going to Congress to ask for war authorization to fight against the Islamic State. And I hear on the talk shows here, people say, oh, ISIS, they're barbarians, cut people's heads off, burning people alive. And yeah, that's true, but there is an equivalency with the United States government. The United States has been around for 239 years. Of that, 214 years, the United States has been at war with someone, whether it be by itself or whether it be abroad against enemies all throughout the four corners of the earth, whether it's communism or jihadism. There's always going to be another enemy. And really, the only country in the world that's doing anything to stop ISIS is Russia, is Vladimir Putin. He knows the threat that they really pose. He sees it in places like Chechnya, in places like Ingushetia, Dagestan. You can look these places up in southern Russia. They're hotbeds of extremism. And Putin understands that. That's why he supports the secular leader of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. Because most of the ISIS fighters are not Syrian. They're coming from Saudi Arabia, biggest U.S. ally, probably had more to do with 9/11 than any other country in the world, biggest U.S. ally in the Middle East. Qatar, another U.S. ally. The United Arab Emirates, another ally. They're also coming from Africa, Libya, Sudan, Egypt, and Chechnya in southern Russia. And so Russia is really the only country doing anything to stop this. The United States is not stopping ISIS. In fact, they are perpetuating ISIS's existence by providing them covert support. Now, sometimes it's not even covert. Sometimes they'll just drop weapons out of the sky to them. Oh, well, they were supposed to go to the moderate rebels, as if there's such a thing as a moderate rebel. And they're airdropping weapons right into territory controlled by the Islamic State. And so now I see Barack Obama. I'm reading today on my news feed here that Barack Obama is quoted as saying that countries who do not toe United States foreign policy's line have to have their arms twisted so that the U.S. can get what it needs. That's the I mean, that's a perfect encapsulation of what is going on in the world. Twisting the arms of other countries. As sovereignty means nothing to this president and presidents before him. They don't care. Remember George W. Bush? You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. There's no gray area. There's no in-between with these people. And I think, unfortunately, our president is one we can include in that list of those Americans who have forgotten history. And it's all of our jobs. It's yours and my job to remind, at the very least, or educate at the most, the collective memory of America of these past actions in our history. What happens when you fund these types of religious extremists? They end up becoming a Frankenstein monster that you can't control. And eventually that's going to come home to roost. And if we don't remind these people of our history, they're going to drag us all into oblivion with them. Because at the end of the day, it is what it is.